Motion carried. Public comment. We have one comment, one presenter.
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Deaver.
Here,
Anywhere.
anywhere.
Anywhere you want.
Sorry for the notes, but I got a 3-minute time limit, so I want to stay on task. But I've been driving around the community recently, and I've been seeing a lot of signs out in yards stating that it's time. And I can't agree more. It's time to correct our elementary facility deficiencies. They're not going away, but they're only growing as enrollment grows. It's time to band together to support the facility committee recommendations. It's time to band together to support the approval of the referendum for funding that it will take to do these improvements. It's time to get out the vote, to get us to 60%. We're at 57% majority the last vote. We need that extra 3%. The plan has been reviewed and re-reviewed. It's time to move forward. Objections and concerns have been gathered and acted on. With my 34 years of financial experience, the last 17 as president of First National Bank, I have found the financial plan to be sound. It's important for the continued growth and development of Cedar Falls. I've also been proud to serve on the last 3 10-year community plans for the city of Cedar Falls, and each of those plans identified the educational importance in the growth and development of Cedar Falls. But it's not only brick and mortar, it's also the environment it provides for the students to learn. And there's another component besides the brick and mortar and those students. It's the teachers. And facilities are what enable us to recruit and retain the best of that commodity. So it's also the timing of this developing of the facilities fits very well as the school foundation embarks on a $5 million campaign called Beyond Great. It's a campaign to provide funding to support other components that lead to educational excellence. It's also time for me to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deaver. We will have the Secretary's financial reports. Mr. Nesfer.
Thank you. If you want to open up your file with the monthly report, or you can view it on the screen, you'll see that in the general fund for the month of October, total revenue was $4,704,502. Expenses $4,134,060 for a fund balance of $13,042,074 rounded. And you can see that where the various breakdowns are with the investments and where the cash is in the checking account. This picture then will show you cash flow compared to where we've been over the last 4 years. We're running pretty much on track where we were in fiscal 2014. It's been pretty steady so far this year in comparison to 2 years ago. And in the management fund, we're running very, very steady to where we were a year ago. So that's running a little bit better than what we initially anticipated in the management fund. And the schoolhouse fund is a statewide local option, or 1 cent sales tax. You can see we had revenue this month of $619,751. Of that, $239,688 was our reconciliation payment for the fiscal 15 school year. We had been averaging about $186,000 a year for a reconciliation payment, so that's a little bit higher than normal. And you can see expenditures. We had a little over $7,700 for some cleanup work on the Hanson project, and then the transfer to our debt service levy for the debt payment that the first one of 2 this year is due was due December 1st. So you can see our ending balance was $8,561,751, And and just a reminder to the board that $2,831,775 of that's restricted of that total. And PEPAL levy revenue for the month was 186,248 with expenditures of 128,388. So our fund balance was in essence pretty similar to last month at $2,571,775. And you can see where the investments and cash are and how we stand in comparison to where we were a year ago. Debt service, there you see the transfer in of the $252,673 from the statewide 1-cent sales tax, plus a little interest that we're earning on that account. No expenditures for November. That will change next month when you see the December report as we make our biannual interest payment for the debt service obligations that the district currently has. Student activity revenue of $72,659, expenditures of $98,812 as we transition from fall sports to winter sports with a ending balance of $643,035. In food service, revenue of $268,791, expenditures of $222,180. Fund balance moved up a little bit. We're at $444,031. I can report that a number of claims for lunches served it continues to grow. We're doing some positive things, and Miss Ecker and her team are doing a great job trying to improve what we're offering for our students, given the restrictions of the federal requirements. And in a coffee shop fund, you can see 1,236 in, 1,962 out for a balance of 6577. And I would entertain any questions that the board might have.
Under the sales and service tax, the SAVE fund,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just noticing a negative number, and I'm wondering what the deal is with that.
Oh,
I'm looking at page 3.
You mean the minus 14,000?
Yeah.
Well, we only had budgeted $10,000 worth of expenditures this year. When we originally set the budget back in March, we assumed that all of the expenses for the Hanson project would have been completed before June 30th.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's a negative number, but the dollars were there anyway, just flowed from one fiscal year to the other.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hearing none, the report will be placed on file for audit.
Thank you.
And we have our student member report. Mr. Fletcher.
So in Student Senate right now, we're busy with different community service events. Last Saturday, Student Senate members volunteered at a crafts day that Prairie Lakes put on. Families in need could come and shop for Christmas presents, and then in another area, then the kids, the families got to do some crafts, and then we were there to help with them, and kind of parents did some shopping. And then on the 20th of December, we will be Christmas caroling at Allen. We're going to be going around to residents there. And then February 19th is our dance marathon. The date has been set. That's a Friday. And then our goal is to raise $2,500 for the U of I Children's Hospital. Our money will go to the UNI dance marathon, but then it all goes to U of I. And then we have a couple fundraising goals set. In the meantime, before the new year, it's going to be selling candy grams for $1. They'll be in the Tiger's Den, and they'll be delivered the following week. And then as well, an ugly sweater day next week as well, and it'll be pay $1. And all that money will go for our dance marathon. And then in sports, our men's and women's basketball both won their games last week. Men's swimming placed second, marks an invite. Wrestling, we had a good showing at the Keith Young Invitational a few weeks ago. And then bowling as well, they won at their meet against Iowa City High last week, so another great week to be a Tiger in sports.
So the big question is, do you have your ugly sweater picked out?
I do.
Good.
I got it on Black Friday at Menards. I was banking on it. We weren't sure if we were going to have it planned, but I already bought the sweater in advance, so we blocked that day in, so I don't have the time to wear it.
Don't think of Menards for fashion statements.
It was cheap, though. So
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. As the next month passes, and it may be nothing that we can do about it, but this year you will not have finals before winter break happens. So, you've kind of experienced both. So I would just be interested anecdotally as you're kind of hearing things over the next month when you guys have to come back and take finals, what your experience has been, what the preference has been from the students, so that if it would happen to come back up, we can share some of that information with the powers that be, so.
Certainly, and I already know now that the sense is that it's not a good thing since you'll have to study over break, but and I can also see how, we'd have extra time and, but I'll make sure to keep my ear open.
And if you decide to go to Des Moines with us sometime, like we talked about last time, that would be really good information to have.
That's right.
Yes.
Do we know, will that be more of a possibility now since last time? Do we know
I don't
anything?
know. We don't have any idea, but that would be something you could talk with them
Probably,
about.
but good to hear how it impacts you rather than.
Right.
More than likely not, because I think the calendar is probably put to rest, and I doubt that they will bring that back up in the near future. But be good input.
Yeah.
All right,
Look and
thank you.
say it.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
And we have now a report from the District Facilities Committee.
Yep, we met as a district facility committee about a week ago, and we have one of our members from the district facility committee here this evening, Mr. Jim Moody, to give the recommendation from the district facility committee and what came out of that meeting that evening. So we're honored to have Mr. Moody here with us tonight.
Easy on the honor. First, on behalf of the Facilities Committee, I'd like to thank the board for a couple different things. One, for tasking us with this mission. Obviously, by the number of educators in the room, this is not a subject taken lightly at any level. And it obviously bears great importance on carrying on the tradition of excellence. We realize that there is a problem, there are issues that need to be addressed. Secondly, from the time between the last bond and this current one, there was more information gathered that was brought to the committee that cleared up some issues and answered some questions in the meantime. And from that, through the process of the evening, it started off with Dr. Petit giving a kind of a background. We had a few new members there that needed some background information. Went through that. From there, we broke into small groups. At our groups, we were asked to discuss several different points, priorities, prioritizing what's important, what's not, and come to a consensus among our small groups, and then have those basically same discussions as a committee as a whole. As the dialogue progressed, there were several topics that were vetted, were discussed, pros and cons of each, and what it was boiled down to was that equity and capacity are two issues at our elementary schools that cannot be separated. They both carry the same equal weight. So from that, we came to the discussion of, where do we go, what do we do? And by looking at what the projections were from last time to what reality is today by the certified enrollment numbers, we came to the conclusion that nothing's changed other than our projections were low. We grew at a faster rate than what was expected, and that our situations have gotten worse than what was expected. We now have more small little bodies in the seats than were expected. And by the number of new housing starts and everything that are already slated and what are projected to happen in the incoming or the near future, that those projections are not going to be low. And historically, they have been within a very tight margin of error. So after those discussions were had, a recommendation was made to come back to the board with a recommendation of moving forward with the same plan as last time, a new elementary school and the renovations to the two elementary schools to address those issues. It was a nearly unanimous vote. There was one person that voted no on the motion, but verbally supported the project. Their question did not lie in the relevance of what the motion contained, but more so in the order of the projects. So still supportive of the projects, was just had an issue with which came first, the high school or the elementary school. Like I said, I believe it was 19-1, something very close to that. So that's where we're at. So that would be the motion that we would make to the board to move ahead with the same issue as last time. and begin to draft language to have it on the ballot in April.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Any questions as far as?
I just want to thank all the members. I know there was some concern when we asked you to review this, but I think for us to make sure that this is a very valid and transparent process for the community, it's important that we went back and had you ask those questions among each other, so that we just weren't debating at the board table, but that we had representative community members who could actually take a very hard look at this, because they are hard questions to ask. And we know what our needs are, but we know that it's not like Christmas, you don't get everything on your list right away. So I really want to thank you for taking the time and trusting us that by having you ask those questions, it was just part of the process, and it was important for us to be able to move forward with the bond recommendation. So
Well,
thank you.
it was interesting listening around the tables and the different groups, how a lot of times the dialogues did not start off in the same place. But through conversation and talking and reviewing facts and looking at more information that the district provided, we all ended up the same place. And that is the importance of the mission and continuing forward with our district. I mean, we have issues that have to be addressed. Like Mr. Deaver eloquently stated, it's time.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I too would like to thank the committee and you, Jim, for your presentation and recommendation. Would I hear a motion that we accept the recommendation?
And I think there's going to be a couple parts to this. Number one, we know that the recommendation is to move forward with the same components of the last bond, which is the new elementary at Orchard Hill and North Cedar. I think one of the things that we need to make sure we come to consensus on is the overall bond ask, the funding component, because that has to be placed on the ballot, which means it has to be placed on the question that goes out and the petition that goes out to our community to put it on the ballot to come back to the board for approval. So we need to get some clarity on that to ensure that we know what that bond ballot question will say with the dollar amount. And we do have a couple slides for the board to be able to go over and go through to make sure we're going in the same format. And I think this one, and Doug can probably describe it and explain it a little bit better than I can, but it's going to show a bond question based on the three projects that we had on the ballot last time. Again, the new elementary remodeling, adding on to Orchard Hill and North Cedar. You will see there are kind of three phases up on the board. One is the design phase, one is the construction phase, and then one is the kind of post-construction phase in the white space. And these are different dollar amounts associated when and what we ask for with the general obligation bond to the public. And the top line is going with a $35 million general obligation bond, which was the ballot question last time. The red line is a $32 million general obligation bond. The green line, light green line, is a 31 general obligation bond, and the bottom line is a $30 million general obligation bond. I think the challenge, or one of the challenges that we're facing, as we all know, construction costs increase. So the last bond question that we asked was about $38.2 million, I believe, right around that margin. We have another slide that shows that now, because of the projections and the increase in construction costs from last year to this year, it has gone up to right around $40 million. As we look at this and seeing some of the cash balances and where we may be at with the 1 cent sales tax to make sure that we can not only handle and have a good cash flow and dollar amount in the bank, but also understanding that we have other projects that we know we need to have accomplished and other needs in our district that we need to have accomplished. I think the recommendation would be to be at that $32 million ask. We have some more cash balances in our bank, which is a good thing. We know that we currently do not have projects that are scheduled past this upcoming summer, which we can add more cash balances into the bank, and we think that we can offset that $40 million cost expectation with about a $32 million ask of the community, which would be less than the last bond slightly, utilizing our cash balances and then our anticipated cash that will come not only through this year but into next year, so we can have a good cash flow and an equalized cash flow that certainly allows us to be in a solid position as a district.
So what you're proposing, or what the scenario that you've run there is to take from the unrestricted cash balance?
Correct.
Correct.
If you'll recall, at the last vote, we were basically committing all the cash that we had on hand as of the date of the bond vote. Well, this time, we're not only recommending that we commit that, we're also committing future years' cash in order to come up with the $8 million. We'll have approximately $5 million on hand as of June 30th. We have set aside money for the high school site should the board decide they want to move on that. And then, assuming the bond issue is successful, as you look at the line on the left, we would start with design work right away, and that's, you can see that's how the line draws down. We would anticipate doing a bond sale probably in March or April of 2017. And then we would use bond sale money during the beginning part of the construction phase. That's why you'll see the line start to move uphill again. And then when we run out of bond money, the $32 million, if that's what we choose to go with, then you can see we come back and we start using our cash that we have on hand, and we're pulling it all the way down, depending upon which dollar amount we go to. With the $32 million, we believe we'll have about $2.5 million in reserve when we get at the low point. $31 million would be $1.5 million, so you can kind of see how it would work. Then the construction phase for the elementary work would be completed, and then as the receipts continue to go in, you would see those individual fund balances start to grow again.
So interest rates are at historic lows right now. Are you contemplating that we bond against save the sales tax revenue?
Not with this, no. We would be using general obligation bond only. So by our recommendation this way is that we believe that it'll allow the board the most flexibility as how they want to move forward with future facility projects. It'll give you fund balance to work on things if you so choose to do that. It'll give you dollars to put towards a future project. It'll give you the remaining unbonded amount of the statewide 1-cent sales tax, whether that sunsets in 2029 or at some point in the future. Should the legislature decide to do that, I just believe it gives the board more flexibility in how it would manage its resources moving forward.
And this gives us enough of a cushion when you draw it down that far that if we need to do more work at the high school, as we've had to do.
We wouldn't be planning on doing any work at the high school with this.
Well, we had a couple classrooms this year, right, that we had to do?
And we still have some PEPAL dollars that we can work with. I mean, we can't do anything large,
Right.
but if we have some emergency repairs or some minor projects similar to what we're going to be talking about with Southdale tonight,
Okay.
we would be able to handle that with a reminder that the PEPAL levy is up for renewal in 2018, and depending upon the outcome of that, that would, one way or another, swing something pretty quickly.
And that's one of the challenges, and again, somebody, a wise man told me a little earlier that we should probably draw a line specifically at when our PEPAL is up, and our PEPAL is up in 2018, and that's certainly a challenge for the district, as we know that's a significant revenue source for us, and if that is either not renewed or for some reason gets delayed in renewal, those amount of infrastructure dollars certainly cause us pause, and that's something that's very important for, I think, the board to understand, that we need to make sure that we have that in our headlights as we move forward.
Doug, with those three lines, why does the $35 million line have a little bump up where all three of the others are trending down, kind of in the June, August 2019?
Because you're not really drawing down against it. If the board was to go with the $35 million GO, you basically do not need any finish out dollars out of the statewide 1-cent sales tax pool. So that's why you see that bump up. And then you've got a debt service payment, and that's why you see the bump down. And then it starts to go back up again. Okay. Where with the other three scenarios, we do need to use cash on hand to finish off the projects.
I guess while I'm all for a rainy day fund, and I mean it's very conservative, I'm all for a rainy day fund. I guess the dilemma that I have of holding a large cash balance is the extremely low interest rate. I mean we get 0.5% on a lucky day for an interest income off our banking account, right?
We're currently getting about 50 basis points, that's correct.
Right. Versus the fact that construction costs are increasing by 5% a year, 6% a year.
Depends, yeah, but typically in that 5%, 6% margin.
So we've got cash sitting here, which we're earning 0.5% on, and we've got construction costs that are increasing by 5, 6, 7% a year. We're getting behind as far as, I mean, I mean, it's as much as I'd like to keep the cash sitting in the bank, we're falling further and further behind because the interest that we're earning on our money doesn't keep up with the cost of what we eventually want to do.
And that's why we're recommending using basically all of our cash balances as well as future cash that will be coming in over the next 2 years. And, you know, the $40 million cost to get a $32 million bond ballot question, it's an $8 million expenditure, and we have right now really the undesignated cash balance within the save at about $5.7 million, $5.6 million. So this is actually going to take some future cash balances into account to make sure that we can get that bond question a little bit lower than what it was.
And if we bonded against, so we've got these funds that come in every year, right? We got, this year was about 4.1, plus we got, you said about 200,000 of extra reconciliation, so about 4.3 million is what came in. Our debt service is about 2.8. Is that
In that area.
yeah? So if you do the 4.4, we got about 1.6 million
1.6, yeah.
that's available every year as a cash flow under the current scenario. That will fluctuate as we have more students. If we're doing this because we're going to have more students, and so our certified enrollment should increase, and therefore our SAVE funds, the funds that we're getting as a result of SAVE, should increase. So the 1.6 should continue to increase year over year, all things being equal.
All things being
All
equal.
things being equal. Yep, there's two components to that, I think. Number one is the executive order that was just passed by the governor that exempts out some pieces from the 1 cent sales tax, which is going to be scary for the future because this is the first time that's happened, and the fear is that could happen additionally into the future. Number two, there's more discussion at the state level if the 1 cent sales tax renewed, will it be capped? And that means will the dollar amount be capped that will go to business expenditure or city expenditure instead of going to school expenditure purposes. And that's a little scary with that discussion going on too.
Do we know what the impact of that executive order will be on us? For that, for example, does the 1.6 change?
It'll go down, obviously. Right now, they haven't given us the final number of the impact. We'll have to wait and see. They're estimating anywhere now net would be potentially $30 to $40 million out of the entire 1 cent or the entire sales tax amount.
But that's not 30 to 40 million just for schools, right? That's just spread.
That's sales tax. Yeah.
Sales tax.
Yeah. I think the issue right now is not the necessary amount, because I don't think it's going to be a huge amount. It's the precedent that's been set that this is the first time it's happened, and what we hear is it's probably not going to be the last time this is going to happen, as there's going to be some potential sales tax breaks for business and industry that will certainly start to impact that overall 1 cent sales tax that school districts receive. So I think it's something that we need to be cognizant about and understand that it's occurred. And as it's occurred, this is, or the fear could be that this is almost the starting to crack the 1 cent sales tax dam, and the water hopefully won't start spilling over across the state.
Yeah. So if we have 1.6 million, and we could, that's available each year. Every year So if we keep everything constant, and we say that's not going to grow, it's 1.6 million. We've got 1.6 million per year from now until 2029, which is when it expires. Hopefully, we get it extended far beyond 2029 because it'll help our high school project and going forward. What about bonding against the 1.6 million that we've got coming in every year and being able to buy down the bond even further?
Yeah, that's a revenue bond, and again, that is something that can be done. It's what we've paid for many of the other facility improvements across our district. I would say the flexibility that we would hope that the board would maintain for that future revenue with future projects that are needed by the district would be important. Utilizing the cash in the bank, the next several years' cash balances that will be coming in to be able to offset the cost of the facility work at the elementary is extremely important. But I think to make sure that as we look forward over the next 12 to 14 years, the district maintains the flexibility, some additional income coming in through that 1 cent sales tax, and understanding the impact of what the PEPL levy in 2018 and what that means to the district. So right now I think it's important to be able to look not only over the course of the next several years with that income coming in to use that to offset the cost of this bond, but also looking long term at the district's needs. And there are multiple needs that we'll have to spend money on, and we're not going to be able to use the 1.6 million to offset a bond cost long term.
Yeah, well, fortunately the PEPL, we require 50% rather than 60%, which, knock on wood, hopefully makes that a lot easier to pass. But, I mean, we are at a historically low interest rate right now. I mean, we can lock in anywhere from 2.4 to 2.6% on that bond from here to 2029. Now, people have been saying already for years that is those historic lows are going to end and it's going to go up. That hasn't happened in the last 5 or 6 years. You know, if we have an opportunity to take money from the future and lock it in at a historically low interest rate, I mean, even if we did just you know, we took 1 million, we said our debt service would be 1 million, which would put us, you know, certainly within the realms of the coverage ratios of 1.2 to 1.25, you know, whatever's required. It would certainly provide us with a sizable chunk of money that we would have available for whatever project, the bond, and we could buy the bond down.
It wouldn't be for any project because with school finance there's something that's called arbitrage, and you cannot hold money for more than 3 years.
And once we have a bond sale, we have to expend the dollars within a very specific timeline, and that timeline's subscribed by the IRS. And so we have to meet those obligations. I guess, to me, the $64 question comes down to, do you want to put all your eggs in one basket now and mortgage out everything you can with your statewide 1 cent sales tax and have very little cash on hand for future improvements, or do you want to take a more middle of the road route and get what we need to get done and still have that seed money or that fund balance on hand to jumpstart those future projects? That, to me, is the $64 question for the board to decide.
And again, I know our recommendation would not to do that, because I think that will put the district in a tenuous position for the future. Our recommendation would be to go with a $32 million bond, utilizing that red line, so we have cash balances on October 19th of about 2.5 million. And then over time, as we look at the additional needs of our district, because we all know we have additional needs, and more than likely in the future, not knowing what the timing will be, but a bond that's going to be requested for high school facility needs, that we are going to have then hopefully some additional resources as time goes by, depending on executive orders, depending on capping of the sales tax, depending on all those dialogue, that we'll be able to use to be able to ensure that those cash flows and those projects hopefully can get done in the right time frame and the right approach.
And if I'm correct, we also then, we have a bus barn that probably needs to be addressed. We have a central kitchen that, I mean, so the high school is the big, as we called it the elephant in the room, but we do have those other projects too, so.
We do. We have several HVAC issues that will probably crop up in the next 3 to 5 years. We have, like you said, some other facility challenges. We have some older piping issues across the district where we had some breakages last year that were significant costs. Our fear is if you, and again, I think Doug summed it up, if you mortgage out some of the future cash flow, some of the emergency type situations may never get accomplished, or you would have to pick and choose potentially which ones would get accomplished. And I think that would put the district in a tenuous situation. We're not in a position where we can go out and if all of a sudden we need cash to go borrow from a bank. That's not the way school finance works. So if an emergency situation happens, you don't have the authority or the cash in the bank, you get by. And again, I don't think in a district such as Cedar Falls you want to just get by.
Do
Yes,
the,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, Doug.
I mean, given that we are in a situation with historically low interest rates, I mean, I know what I did in my household, which has nothing to do with school finance. It just makes me know enough to make me dangerous. But there are things that you're supposed to do when interest rates are low. Is there something we can be doing to take advantage of that? Or is it the arbitrage is just going to kill us because any money we save, we have
I can't, the district cannot legally
Yeah.
sell any bonds without a project.
Right. Okay.
No,
That's the first,
Yeah.
That's the challenge. In
so
this-
your hands, that's where you start from there. Obviously, we want to leverage everything the best we
Right.
possibly can. After we make our principal payment here June 1st, we've had some conversations about possibly doing some advanced refunding with our existing revenue bonds. We may be able to pick up some savings with that. Our people that we work with, Spear Financial, is recommending we take a really hard look at that come July, and we will do that. But at this point, without a project on the table,
Right. Gotcha.
And again, that annual dollar amount that would come in above and beyond with our 1 cent sales tax, we're really using those funding sources for the next 2 years. It's about $1.6 million. We have about the 5.6 in the bank. The hope would be the projects will come in at bid or at estimate with the bidding process, but that's not a given. So there's a little bit of flexibility in there with that, but you're talking about the $8.6 million in the bank plus $3.2 million, trying to get that down to $32 million. We are really focused to make sure that we can get this done, to make this a very reasonable project for the purpose of the improvements as discussed.
what enrollment projection are you using in your scenarios?
flat,
So no enrollment projection.
correct.
That's part of when you do these projections and the safety nature that is put for Iowa code and the budgeting process, you put in that 0%.
But isn't it a bit circular? We're building new facilities because we're assuming increased enrollment, yet we do our financial projections based on flat enrollment. I mean, I understand that from a bonding standpoint.
Yep.
No underwriter. It's just like if you go in and ask for, I'm going to buy a house. Well, base the loan on what I'm going to make in 2 years. I get it. Nobody's going to give you a loan for what you say you're going to make in 2 years. But from an internal standpoint, I mean, absolutely every one of our kids needs to have the same educational experience and doesn't need to be in a trailer. That is unacceptable, and unfortunately we're going to be facing that within 4 or 5 years at the high school, right?
Or sooner.
Or sooner. So that is absolutely unacceptable, that condition. So really what we're trying to do is figure out how do we get to the end game, which is all of our facilities upgraded all throughout the district, and do it in a way that leverages historically low interest rates, faced with as well that when we went with the full package, unfortunately the community overwhelmingly rejected it. So we have to try and figure out how we come up with a formula that allows us to make this bond go through with flying colors, and preserves, balances our capacity to fund it in the future with the community's ability and willingness to pay for a new high school, which will have to come. I mean, I wouldn't set a date for it right now because it's out there. But you know, if we can, so coming back to the discussion of, you know, so I understand that we can't we can't lock in historically low interest rates and say, okay, let's take $10 million and set it over here in the kitty, and we're going to use that someday, and that wouldn't be responsible to anybody. But if we have, for example, $10 million that we could bond against for the SAVE funds, which would be dedicating about $1 million a year from here till 2029 at 2.5% interest rate. You know, we could take that balance down. We could decide yes or no to use some of the 5.8. So really, we'd have about, you know, we've got about $15 or $16 million of total capacity. Now we have these other projects. We've got the bus barn. There's plenty of other things that we're doing. So one of the things that we talked about in the work session was what is the upper limit, and we haven't established what that upper limit is. The upper limit I think is about $16 million.
Define upper limit.
Upper limit as far as our internal financing capability.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to sell revenue bonds today, 13.38 is our cap.
And that's gross. So net.
And that's gross,
Mm-hmm.
so it's about 12 million net. Because remember, we have to put approximately 10% of that into a reserve.
Right.
So we'd have about 12 million net to work with.
So we'd have the 12 million. So that would be the 12 million plus the 5.8 million that we've got as far as unrestricted cash balance. That's kind of the upper limit then. So nearly $18 million
That would be correct.
is our upper limit that we've got available. And so our decision is how much of that capacity do we want to draw down in this bond, knowing that we have additional facilities requirements in the future. That's
You could say it that way.
right. So you know, and I'm just. So I can see merit in saying, okay, we want to preserve that capacity of those annual funds, that 1.6 million, which is flat, which if enrollment increases, that number will increase as well because debt service is fixed. Versus saying, okay, I want to dip in, I want to take some of that and bond against it right now at 2.5%. And lock that in, buy down this bond, and then the capacity that I'm reserving is really the capacity of the community to pay for this in the future. Because we're not asking them for as much today, and so we'll do that more from internal resources today, and then when we come back, yes, we'll still have to come back for a large number in the future for property taxes whenever we think that the timing is right to do the high school, but we're preserving the community's capacity to pay, not our capacity to pay. So
and you're leveraging us for the future. We will generate about $80,000 a year on increased enrollment. So if you use all of our capacity and you are banking on $80,000 of additional revenue per year with no capacity, and something happens, which we know something will happen. That's just the nature of having 12 buildings, 12 school-owned properties. Something will happen, and then the other projects we need to get done. All of a sudden, you're talking that projects won't be accomplished because that additional increase from students, at $900 a student, again, will be about $80,000 to $90,000 a year, and that's not, as we will talk about later in this meeting about the Southdale remodel process to finish that 5-year plan, is not inexpensive. So we understand and know that as we look at other projects, all capacity is taken away from the district. You take away the flexibility to do what's necessary to best serve and educate our kids.
We're essentially taking $8 million out of our capacity right now to
It's our cash balances and anticipated cash balances that will grow in the next, not only this year, but for next year.
We've got a lot of assumptions also that the bids will be what we projected. You know, you projected up to 4.2 million, and as we see later tonight, that bid that we looked at a couple weeks ago is higher, the estimate.
And the other thing out of all of this, if by some happenstance, is that we're budgeting $40 million for these three projects. If they come in at $38 million, because of the timing on when we would sell the bonds, the board would have the option of saying, maybe we don't sell $32 million worth of revenue bond or GO bond, we won't need that. You have a little flexibility under this scenario as well, even with that. I mean, it all boils down to what your capacity is and what your tolerance is going to be for having reserve funds or funds on hand for future projects. It's really what it comes down to. And my position is to look at is to try and give this Board of Education the most flexibility possible in making those future decisions. But it is your decision to make how you want to move with this.
And certainly administration's recommendation would be the $32 million bond question based on the recommendation from the facility committee to move forward with the three projects.
I do understand your point, Jeff. I mean, I guess knowing that we do need to come back, and I would prefer to come back sooner than later, it makes me nervous to not, I mean, you're talking about the community's tolerance, and, you know, I think we know they're a little friendlier to one project than others, so, I mean, I'm more concerned about their tolerance for, you know, when we need to come back for the high school, so, I mean, to me, it's almost a 6, 1/2 dozen the other. You know, are you going to make them feel more comfortable here? Are you going to make them feel more comfortable here? Not knowing what's going to happen with the sunset on the one-cent sales tax makes me uncomfortable. Knowing that right now we have a kind of a structure in place that's leading the state that's very business friendly and not so schools friendly. So I guess, you know, it really is. It's where your comfort level lies, and I think mine lies with being able to come back and support those later projects with being able to bring a lower number. So.
I'm leaning that you know, since the recommendation is to your 3 lines, 3 scenarios, completely preserve whatever funds that come from the save. So we're completely preserving the capacity to do revenue bonds against the sales tax, right?
The board will have flexibility for a future revenue bond should it choose to do that. Now, it won't be at 13.38 million.
Nope.
But if the sunset is extended past 2029, then you will have all those additional years that you can add on to that to increase that overall capacity.
That's right.
And, you know, hope is not a strategy, but the hope would be that the legislature and the governor would agree to some sort of extension to that 2029 sunset.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily bonding against those. It's going to be, you know, the annual income, the annual revenue that the district receives to be able to offset and hopefully build up some cash balances potentially to offset future needs, future projects. So if the board in the future says that they're due to the capacity, due to maybe the needs, maybe a certain project, then yes, you would be able to tap into that and use that.
Yeah, so we've got 12 million, what did you say, Doug, 12 million available right now, 12 points?
We would net, if we sold revenue bonds today, we would net at 12 million.
Is that a flat debt service all the way through to 2029, or
That'd
is
be
that
through 2029?
So it's
That's not flat.
It's not. So you do
We're doing a wraparound.
Okay.
Because we got to remember we've got 2 existing issuances outstanding. One of them that sunsets in 2022 or 23. Don't hold me to that.
Yep.
And so we're sort of wrapping around that. Okay.
Yep.
And those are at what interest, Doug?
The one that's due in 2029 is just over 5%. And that's the one that we're really focusing in on to do an advance refund possibly later in the second half of calendar 16. The small one it's less than 2.5, but don't hold me to exactly what it is. And so there's not And when we looked at the analysis last week with the folks at Spear, that one's going to be hard to capitalize out or to pencil out in a positive manner. But the bond that's due in 2029 has some potential. And once we get past, again, their recommendation was to wait till after we made our principal payment in June of 2016 and then take a real hard look at it at that time.
Doug, can you need to remind me, when we launched the technology plan, did we use any 1 cent sales study? I can't remember what we used to kind of get, no, none of it was touched with that.
That was the one-time money.
It's just the one-time money. I mean, I guess my question is, not knowing what's ahead in the next 5 years, if there was some other program like that we decided was very, beneficial to the district, is that funding that we would want to or would look at using for that, or no? The sales.
It could be, depending on what kind of project, depending on what kind of programs, depending on is it infrastructure costs that can be associated into that categorical fund. So I think the answer is yes. There would be that potential, especially when you start looking at, it could be 3D printers, it could be other technology components, it could be different pieces that we could use those funds for. So the answer is maybe.
I just wondered if that's an important component to have flexibility for.
Well, we know that there are going to be some technology upgrades that we'll continually have to do in our district, and switch and backbone components that are going to be ongoing costs. A lot of those now are taken out of our PEPL, but again, 50% majority, but still that PEPL timeline in 2018 is something that we have to keep our eye on in the forefront. And I would imagine that if we did not do some of the components with technology that we currently do, even with some of our challenges, that would be a great setback for us as a district.
And in launching the CAPS program this fall, as that grows, do we anticipate
Probably not infrastructure dollars, not 1 cent sales tax dollars. That would be more probably general fund dollars. But I could see, as we look at that expansion in that program, there could be some infrastructure dollars as we look at making sure that kids have best access to the technology necessary, the components necessary as that program grows in the future.
Susie, do you have any comment, input?
My thought is that the administration has looked at this and are guiding in a conservative way for the community, and we have future things that we've got to be able to fund as well.
Well, I'd like to reach consensus on this, and we have Jeff. Are you?
Well, I'm not sure that 30, because here's the range. We could go as low as, if we got 18 million available, we could go as low as 22 on an ask. So we could go 40 million to 22 million, right? I mean, let's just call the, and so I want to be able to communicate, that we can communicate clearly to people, well, why did we ask them for their property taxes instead of using our internal resources first? I mean, that's, and that we're able to articulate that in a way so that, hey, we've got other needs going on. We do have other large facilities projects that are coming up in the future. So to be able to say that in a persuasive way, and not say, well, we wanted to spend your money first. I mean, that doesn't come out very well. So I mean, I think it seems like if we've got that range available, that we could go for a less of an ask than 32 as far as on the bond. And I think that you could get into polling and what that does as far as the community. What does every $1 million less of ask buy you as far as supporters? I'll leave that to somebody who's got a minor in political science to ask that question, to answer that question. But I do believe it helps if we lessen that, and then if we're good stewards of that money, we hopefully get bids that are less than that. The community sees the progress and sees, hey, this is great. There's going there'll be economic development that comes out of it. Assuming that we don't go into another recession or there's external factors that we don't have any control over. So
You know, Jeff, I agree with you on that. I think that it's really good we have clarified all that, but I think that they have done that. I think they have gone from, actually 40, was 35, and then, you know, it was 38, now they've gone to 40, and I think they've done a really good job in doing exactly what you're saying and coming back with the 32. I think they've done that, yeah. Go ahead.
I'm just not sure why your bottom number is 18, because I'm looking at this, the bottom number seems to me.
Well, it doesn't show.
No,
that.
because this scenario
Because
here.
otherwise you dip below.
Yeah, no, but this scenario here, Doug, does not. We have two sources of funding. We have the unrestricted funds that are available in our bank account today, and that will continue to increase as additional funds come in every year. Then we have a bonding capacity, which we can bond against future cash flows.
Got it.
And so that's the number that Doug was talking about,
And
is
that's what you're adding to
the
that.
13.8. So yes, both scenarios are not reflected up here. This is only one of the scenarios, which is using existing cash that's in the bank.
Gotcha.
And I think you said something very wise there, and I think as a school board, you need to look out for what's best for our community, what's best for our schools, but more importantly, what's best for our students. And I think if you say we're going to use all of our capacity to go down to $22 million bond, I think you're going to jeopardize what's best for students in the future.
And you won't get any pushback from me on that statement. I believe that. But I think we just need to be clear. That's our upper limit.
Exactly.
And that would be, I believe, fiscally irresponsible
Yep.
because then we're definitely with our backs against the rope, and we get one hiccup in the road. You know, although that is also assuming flat enrollment, which,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. No, understand completely. And as you look at that, you know, you talk about that $18 million spread. I would say, you know, in essence, we're using 8 of the 18 million for immediate needs to be able to help offset that burden and that cost to go from the high end 40 down to 32. The other 10 million is something that'll be spread out over the course potentially of the next 14 years, 13 years, to offset the needs of the district, to make sure that as we look at the ongoing facility challenges, to make sure that we look not only short-term but long-term, we can use those oncoming and incoming funds prudently, efficiently, and in the best interest of our students as we look over the course of that time frame. And I think that's important to articulate.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, I'm not trying to create, these are, I think, all important arguments that we need to be able to articulate. But yes, we have additional facilities needs, but we've just gone through the process of updating, you know, and if, assuming we do this, we'll have all of our elementaries upgraded. We've done our junior highs, and the remaining gorilla in the room and the elephant in the room will be the high school. So just start. I know there's going to be always ongoing. There's more. You know, a boiler goes out. There's a roof to be replaced. There's all of those. But as far as big nuts that we have in the next 10 years, as far as large things that we need to do that are, you know, multi-million-dollar things.
Lots. In fact, junior highs are going to be a challenge. As we well know, our bubbles are coming through, and our junior highs are going to need to probably, in the next 5 years, look at some additional capacity challenges with where they are at. We know that the central kitchen is something we'll continue to need to address and look at. We're going to have to do something with our bus facility, our maintenance facility. We are growing buses 2 to 3 per year. We have no room to park buses. In fact, we can't put air conditioning on buses because we don't have a facility that allows those buses to go into our shop. In fact, we break strobe lights if we have ice chunk fall off of a bus because they'll run over the ice chunk and hit on the roof. So we have challenges as a district that we're going to have to address that weren't included in that well, they were included in the 10-year plan, but we did not address those with that first bond, knowing that prudently we're looking at capacity, looking at some additional revenue long term that would help us as time goes by to put those off as they come up. And if we go to a far extreme, we won't have that. So by being prudent, by finding a middle ground with a $32 million bond that allows flexibility and focus on the future to do what's best as a district as we look at all the projects across our 12 right now buildings that we own, hopefully 13 buildings once we build a new elementary.
So
Andy,
there are,
I'm sorry.
Please.
Can I clarify something too? You made the comment that all of our elementaries have been upgraded. All of our elementaries have had some upgrades, but I want to make clear at Hanson and Southdale, we still have some rooms that haven't been upgraded. So I just want to make sure everybody is on the same page there.
That's a very good point.
Thanks, Pam.
We also, within that 10-year plan, I think Phil Denier did a very good job describing that, saying we will need to go back and renovate some of those, again, at the time, calling 21st century spaces, our collaborative spaces, our hands-on learning spaces that aren't in some of the other sections of the buildings that either have been upgraded or remodeled or built, in the last 8 to 10 years. And those are spaces that will need to be added in to make sure that we have the necessary spaces to meet some of those areas that we focus on education. So those are going to be needed to be retrofitted as well.
so there are 4 multi-million-dollar projects there. The 2 junior highs and the bus barn and the central kitchen, not including this.
And one other thing that
And our swimming pool is not the best shape.
you mentioned something which I want to make sure we all clarify this. You talked about our money being the schools and the community's money. And it's all the community's money. It's not the school's money. It's not the community's money. We're not spending that. It's all of it together. So it's not that this is somebody against somebody. This is an investment for the community, which includes the schools. So it's all together. I don't want anything separated here.
I know, I would assume there are people who don't see it that way, and that's what we're trying to accommodate their feeling that they don't share in that. But
It is
I would
public
agree. I think
public
we all know.
education.
Yes, I
Yes.
think we all know that. I think there unfortunately is a segment of the community that doesn't see it that way. But
And
so
that
it's
just
trying
means-
to make sure that we are making them comfortable enough to support what we're trying to do.
Jeff, can you accept the reduction down to the 32 million?
I would like to see it a little lower.
But I guess I'm asking, can you accept the 32 million?
Well, and tonight is more of a consensus building process to make sure everybody would be comfortable, because as we know, we can't ask for a bond ballot question. It has to come from our community in a petition. So the next steps would be to craft a petition, a petition language, work with our community and individuals in our community to craft what that language would read to bring back a petition to the board to approve in January. And that's why we need to have clarity, because the dollar amount needs to be on that petition to ensure that that's what the bond question will be. Anything that changes from that petition has to go back through the entire process, because you can't have a petition signed by the 800 signatures, 600 signatures that we need. That would change.
And just to be clear on the motivations behind it, it is that one, we're fiscally responsible as we can be, that we accomplish that this bond passes with flying colors, punches through the 60% level, and 3, we reserve our community's capacity, wherever that money may reside, ability that when we need to upgrade a high school, which will be an 800-pound gorilla, that we give ourselves the best chance of success for achieving that in the future as well.
And I think Jenny addressed that some, in that if we start out too low now, we will have to ask more later for the high school, correct?
Maybe now we'll pay me later.
Yeah. So if it wasn't overwhelmingly defeated last time. We were very close. And we have looked at all this. We've taken it back to our facility committee. We've really gone over this all again, and we are lowering this because we now have, it's later. We've had an increased enrollment. We have looked at that. We've been fiscally responsible. They have really looked at this. I don't want to have to defeat the high school one because we have too much that we are responsible for left from this one. So we have to ask more when we go up for the high school.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have a crystal ball that tells us
No, we don't.
how the different
We
scenarios
don't, but
work out.
I trust the people that are working on this to know what's best. I trust them. I'm hoping maybe you'll be able to agree with that 32. And then maybe we'll save $1 million later with the high school.
the way I understand, we need to accept this recommendation in order to go ahead and have the signatures taken so that we can put it on a ballot. We do not have to have this in the form of a motion, and but we need to have consensus.
Are you all the rest of you in consensus?
I mean, for you, is it about the number or the argument? I mean, I guess, part of me, knowing that Doug is conservative, which I appreciate, I mean, I guess I don't have a problem having an argument or a debate with someone in the community saying, yes, we're being extremely conservative. I mean, it seems like, a fairly strong position of debate to come from, to say, we're not being risky, we're not depleting our resources, we are being, and I know what your point is. Do you think that holds any weight, saying that, we are looking at this very conservatively? If enrollment continues to grow, we will likely pay this bond off sooner, or we would be able to, come back with a lower ask later. Do you think any of those arguments hold any weight?
I mean, I think we can use. I think all those are very valid arguments. And I understand the apprehension to use, to bond against the SAVE fund. If I had a crystal ball that told me what interest rates would do, I might be more inclined to say we should dip into that and leave our funds available.
No, I understand, and I think it's more about balance. We, as you said, there's a range of 22 to 40. We're trying to find that middle balance to make sure not only do we have capacity for the future for other projects and ongoing maintenance components, but also helping our community know that we are trying to look at the overall ask very carefully and wisely. And to me, finding that middle ground, and again, that's why we are making the recommendation of $32 million is a middle ground to try to meet that.
At this point, I know I've been going back and forth for, I guess, a couple of months. But I think at this point I'm in consensus.
Okay, let's go ahead.
Okay. Good. Very good. Thank you for discussion and leadership.
Thank you.
Accepting that. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go
I
into...
don't know if everybody wants to stay for the remainder of this. I know you certainly can. And again, we have...
It's not a snow day.
Your excuse, Chris.
First and foremost, thank you for being here.
Thank you all for coming.
I don't want to kick you out. You can stay. We'd love to have you stay.
I think we have to stay
There's always
Yeah, you
the
have to
chance
stay,
that we won't
Jenny.
meet that much. And I think to be conservative.
I didn't want to do a mass exodus, but...
This is what we're asking for, if you want to.
Exactly.
And together.
I thought they were all here for the TLC.
I do too. That's a heck of a program. Let's move into our Dr. Andy or Dr. Adrian.
It's actually me. I know Adrian, Dan, Pam will chip in. Mr. Sproul, hopefully Mr. Young might chip in too as well. But this is really an opportunity to come back with the board on something that was approved earlier. But I'll talk about that in a bit. But this is for our teacher leadership and compensation system. It's an informational report just to give you a little bit of background of where we're at and hopefully where we'll be at in the future. I will use the acronym quite often of TLC. That's kind of how it's affectionately known across the school districts in the state of Iowa. So please ask any questions that might come up, and I'll certainly do my best to answer them, or I know much wiser people around the table and in the audience can answer them because they've been very actively involved with this from the start, now almost over 2 years.
No, we did not.
This
We
started.
didn't get this PowerPoint, did we?
It's on the website. It's on the website. It didn't go out in the board
That sounds great. I
documents.
just want to make sure I didn't miss one.
We had a TLC meeting on Friday, so we just kind of wrapped everything up Friday morning, and I wanted to take some of those components to put in this, so it didn't go out with the documents.
Sounds great. I just want to
Friday.
make sure I hadn't missed something.
Yep, but it
Thanks.
is on the website. We
Okay.
put that up there on the website. What is TLC? And again, it started in 2013 legislation. It was part of the education reform process that came out of that. And really, it aligns with a lot of our district priorities when we start looking at what were the goals of TLC that came out of that legislative reform package. First and foremost, we know our first priority always is improved student learning as a district, and that is the number one goal from the TLC framework from, again, that DE legislation. We really pride ourselves on making sure we have strong leadership roles across our district, and that's what the second goal talks about is career pathways, to allow pathways built into the system to have more opportunities for teachers to move into leadership roles other than administration. And I think the caveat to this is we know being a teacher is being a leader, but these are talking about the teacher leadership and compensation goals and pathways. The third goal, collaboration, fits in well with our PLC process, our collaborative teams, and the continued focus we have as a district. And then 4 and 5 really are our primary focus of the DE legislation is to retain and attract new teachers. And we certainly pride ourselves on not only retaining great quality educators, but attracting great quality educators. As we all know, we have tremendous teachers across our district. So our process, and again, I won't read these slides to you, but I cannot thank enough our 15 members that were involved with this teacher leadership and compensation. We held our first meeting November 13th, 2013, and there is a ton of work that was done. It was unbelievable what needed to be done, the amount of detail that needed to go into this, and to really vet a very thorough process. It was a very lengthy application process that the board approved with that framework, October 30th, 2014, a little over a year ago. 27 pages of great detail that went to the DE in the state of Iowa on October 31st, 2014, and we were approved to start this in August of 2016. So what does this mean for our district? TLC funding. The state allocated roughly $50 million per year over 3 years for a total investment of $150 million into teacher leadership and compensation. For next year, that's about $312 per student, so the Cedar Falls School District will receive just a little over $1.5 million. And as a reminder, this is categorical funding. This can't be used for anything else besides paying for these teacher leadership and compensation components and pieces. One of the first things that we did as a committee, going back 2 years ago, the first meeting, we started talking about what is our purpose, what is our vision, and we finalized that in the second meeting. And the question truly was, when people come up and talk to you about what does this committee do, we wanted to be able to have an answer. And truly the answer is what's listed here. Focus on student achievement, focus on leadership roles that impact instruction through our professional learning community and our collaborative teams, because everything runs through our PLC process. Our committee members, there's 13 listed. We lost a few along the way. One moved away, one took another job, so that was the process. So there's 13 listed. Great cross-representation of committee members. We have both Mr. Sproul and Mr. Young in the audience, and again, I don't know if you ever want to say anything about the process, but you certainly can. Still not done. Still giving work.
My goodness, we had English teachers on his mission.
That was very, very positive to be able to have that. And again, you cannot thank the members of this committee enough. There has been a great amount of time devoted into this, many, many half days worth of work, much time devoted outside of the school day. We did have just a tremendous committee to accomplish this. We did do a great amount of research as we started this process. This is just a snapshot, some quick pictures that I took of some of the articles that we read, some of the data that we looked at with the pie charts. Up in the upper right-hand corner, we actually surveyed all of our staff members last year to talk about if you look at some of these positions, would you be interested? What are your thoughts? Give us feedback on the TLC process. And it was really a very in-depth, intensive amount of research. We had many of the people on the committee that attended several state-level meetings. We had people that attended conferences, people that went to the AEA to get feedback. We spent a great deal of time researching other districts' leadership roles. The upper left-hand article talks about 10 different roles for teacher leaders. What do those look like? What are the impact on the educational programs? A lot of time is what I'm trying to get across. And it was unbelievable, again, how much research went into this.
Andy, was that pie chart our staff right there?
No, that was
No.
actually a national study that was done that talked about teachers across the United States. How many of them, number one, have an interest in being an administrator? I think was one of the first questions. And it came out to roughly about 92% said no, I have no interest in being an administrator. But the next question I was asked was, if a teacher, are you interested in teaching and leading in a hybrid role? And you can see 48% said probably not. But it's really about 50% that said yes, and that's where this 2013 legislation came from, to really talk about how do we create some different hybrid roles for our teachers to be able to have some of those leadership opportunities. So that was actually a national study. Here's kind of a basic overview of some of the leadership roles that we included in the grant. Down at the bottom you'll see these are kind of position estimates. This is what we hope to fill. With these positions. We have what we call district level positions. These are going to be full-time positions. Our staff and teachers will still be underneath a 279 contract. However, they'll be working full-time in these roles. The first one you can see is instructional coaches. Total of 15 instructional coaches across our district. Some of these the majority of these will be kind of pedagogical coaches. Some of them will be technology instructional coaches as well, to be able to help with technology infusion.
Will that be K to 12?
That will be K through 12. Yeah, pre-K 12 actually.
Okay.
Community STEM coordinator. We have one that will be working district-wide to help partnerships, to help bring in potential businesses and other entities and pair those with classrooms to help that coordination. And then we have a curriculum and PD person that will help with some of the curriculum and professional development, really more focused secondarily at that level. And then we have building level supplemental positions, building tech integration leaders, with 45 of those positions being paid and potentially some additional time. Building leadership teams with individuals having some additional supplemental time, extra days, as well as some opportunities for those positions. And then mentor and peer coaches across our district that will be, model teachers helping support other new teachers and career teachers across our district in multiple ways.
So when you say supplemental, you mean either they're devoting extra hours, or
Yes, they
there's
will
time
be-
for subs?
Correct.
Okay.
They will be full-time teachers with these as supplemental
Okay.
responsibilities,
Okay,
like
so
a
the
coach.
monies can be used for
Yes,
substitute teachers if they need to be at these.
correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
We have some budget set aside for sub time.
Mhm.
These people, for the most part, will be working, within their teaching contract on these responsibilities. Some during the day, a lot of it going to be, before and after.
Is that community partner person also the CAPS community liaison, or not necessarily?
It could be. That's something that I could grow into the future. This position is, again, a 279 contract, but we have this one built in with 20 extra days throughout the school year, so there will be some extra time during the summer, really to focus on how do we create better partnerships, stronger partnerships, and stronger STEM opportunities for students throughout.
So then we'll be limited to our CAP strands. It'll be broad.
Yep, pre-K through 12.
And just to double check, 279 means 279 days.
No, that's Iowa
Is that-
code.
That's an Iowa code thing.
279.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how you.
I didn't know what he
My-
meant for
my
sure
fault.
either.
Sorry.
It's close to
Very
the number of
good
days.
question. Yes. 279, and Adrian can answer this in greater detail than I can, but it's in Jim, but it's basically Iowa code requirement, and it specifies exactly what goes into those contracts.
Basically, licensed teacher contract.
Okay.
One of the things that I wanted to show was the work of the subcommittees recently. We broke into subcommittees to really focus on role descriptions, what will be the process to apply in the hiring process. We had a subcommittee, and really have to thank Julie Kugler for creating a website and also different handouts and flyers. And finally, we're working on a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU acronym, to make sure that we have it very, very clearly articulated and clarified what will happen if you move into a TLC position and then move out of a TLC position back into the classroom, what that would look like. And what I wanted to do is just to kind of show you a little bit of the website.
Andy, would you allow me to just say a little
Please.
more about the MOU?
Yep.
The memorandum of understanding essentially addresses items which, under Chapter 20 of the Iowa Code, which is the public sector law which governs terms and conditions of employment, things like salary, hours of work, professional development, number of other items. The Iowa Code requires that those are items that are negotiated with the recognized bargaining unit. In this instance, it would be the Cedar Falls Education Association. So these roles all receive pay, so that would be a negotiable topic. I think the quality of the product that we've got is directly related to the fact that CFEA and the district agreed from the outset we wanted to start with what's the purpose, what's intended for outcomes, what are the roles, what is the nature of the work, all of which, by the way, are not negotiable topics. And when we've got that in place, now we need to talk about salary, hours, and things like that. So we started off with high-level purpose. Eventually you have to answer questions like hours of work and things like that. So this memorandum of understanding essentially becomes an addendum to the collective bargaining agreement addressing things which under Chapter 20 are negotiable. I think if we'd started off saying, well, we're going to address all the negotiable items, and once we've got that taken care of, then we'll talk about what are these people going to be doing and why do the jobs exist, we would end up with a very different product. And so I want you to know as a board that CFEA have been very cooperative from the outset, which was our preferred approach as well, and we feel extremely good about what Dr. Patty is presenting.
So this is just kind of an overview of the website. Thank you, Adrian, for that, Dr. Talbot. And there's some things that still need to be pre-populated into this website, but it just kind of gives you the overview and the flavor of some of the things that we've been working on. It goes through kind of the teacher leadership structure and what that'll look like as far as number, the extra days, and those components. It certainly goes into then, and we'll just pull up the Community STEM Partnership, goes into what the role description looks like, what are the responsibilities specified with the length of service and the other components for the requirements to do that work and do that work in the way that we expect for the impact we hope to have.
Is that site set so that anybody can see it?
It will be. Right
Okay.
now, no, but
Okay.
it will be.
Still in process, okay.
It is.
Okay.
And then we also had subcommittees, again, very diligent work, very detail-oriented work to start looking at the interview rubrics. What questions will be asked? What will the rubrics look like? Not only, and this is the instructional coach component, so this is for the interview for the instructional coaches, but then also the instructional coaches as coaches with the emphasis on technology. And it goes into detail about the specific questions, what are we expecting with the answers as far as the depth of answers, the depth of experiences, to ensure that we have the right focus so those coaches can do the right amount of work. So again, there's been a great amount of, I guess, diligence over the course of the last 2 years as we are focused on doing what is best, not only through this TLC process, but certainly with the meeting our vision of helping ensure deeper learning for all of our students. And again, you cannot thank the committee enough for all of their work and all of their expectations from the onset. So when we go back then to the PowerPoint, the subcommittees, we finalized the work for all the district level positions, the 17 full-time positions this past Friday. Our hope and our intent is to start looking at recruiting and advertising and having those instructional coaches, the STEM and the PD positions hired in January. And then replacements for those people hopefully hired in early spring. Our building level positions, we are looking at a potential March, April time frame to get those hired and in place, knowing that those are still going to be classroom instructors. So it's going to be a supplemental process and a supplemental pay, and that will not have the timeliness of those building level positions.
Another quick point to make is that all of these positions have to be hired or selected from within. So we have to have somebody from within the district who agrees to be an instructional coach or a STEM coordinator or whatever, because we are not allowed to go out and hire somebody from the outside to fill those positions.
Exactly.
Even if we aren't able to fill internally?
That's correct.
And that was part of the
legislation.
2013 legislation.
Okay, so say that again, that the full-time instructional coaches and so on, those are from within, as well as the ones in spring are also from within?
All the
No,
supplemental
not the
ones.
March, April hires.
Okay, that's
Oh,
what,
yeah.
okay, that's, okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's,
We'll hire people to replace the people that are moving into
Don't have to be
these
from within.
leadership
No.
positions.
gotcha, okay.
Yeah, they'll be
that's-
external,
okay,
more than likely.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So are we bound to hire all of those positions? I mean, say you had 14 great candidates and you didn't have 15. I mean, I'm sure we will, but do you not hire 15 or do you
Yes.
go ahead and you
Yep.
don't, you just hire what?
Yep, hire what we are able to. And some of it's going to be budget constraint as well. If all of a sudden we have 16 people apply, but all of them are 30 plus years plus master's degrees, we might have to say, well, do we pare back and only hire 14 instructional coaches instead of 15? Or do we look at other components within the CLC program? Because you shouldn't use general fund dollars to supplement categorical funding with teacher leadership and compensation. So there could be several rationale why we don't have the number of positions hired for what's up on the board. By Iowa code and by legislation, you have to have 25% of your staff in teacher leadership positions. As you notice, we have well over 40% positions on the board based on those 6 categories. So we feel very comfortable. We'll easily hit the 25%. We'll exceed that 25%. But if we don't meet every single one of those, again, lack of a better word, quotas up on the board, then we're still within the framework that we need to be.
How long have they guaranteed the funding or what is, I mean?
Great question. Great
I was going to
question.
ask that same thing, Jenny. I was going to ask the same
And
thing.
that's one of that's one of the first things we talked about, that these positions are based on funding. And again, we have structured and working on that MOU to ensure that those individuals that may move into this always have that protection of moving back into positions, but also to understand that if the TLC categorical fundings go away, it doesn't impact our general fund dollars and our other programs across our district. Now, the state will tell you that these funds are going to be very difficult to take away over time because they are categorical funding, and something that we'll continue to look at, advocate, and hopefully have in place for years to come.
We were one of how many districts that were accepted?
Right now, they have gone through the third and final round, and I shouldn't say final because there's kind of a third component of the third round, but there are 40 districts as of yet that have not received it or applied, and their application was not accepted because it didn't meet their threshold. So I would say there's roughly about 300 districts that have been approved across the state. I believe we were one of the first 120 or 130 districts approved in the state.
You said this was about approximately how much per student? $321?
312, roughly.
312.
Yep.
So we're getting about 1.6 million.
Yeah, about 1.55, roughly, in that range.
Yeah, 1.56. Okay. So so our challenge would be if this, and we got a 3 year, as long as there's not an executive order or something like that would take it away.
It would take an active, since it's in
It's a
code now,
legislature.
the legislature would have to vote to eliminate it.
Because it's dedicated categorical
Because it is
funding.
dedicated
Yeah.
Okay.
fund.
So it's going to be a challenge to take it away. The challenge will be, because it's categorical, with supplemental state aid, they can now pick which categories actually receive additional funding. So they could actually say TLCs will receive 0 supplemental state aid, or they could say TLCs will receive 6% supplemental state aid. So that's something that we just have to continue to watch into the future, what the dialogue will be and the impact it could have on the other funding sources.
Right. No, I just hope that they don't look at that and go, well, look, you've already got your increase of funds for this year.
Well,
That's what they said last year. That was rolled into some of the dialogue in their talking points.
And do they, as they look at it, because we know salaries will go up every year, I mean, is it supposed to kind of increase with that cost inflation or whatever every year, or is it just 1.55 forever and ever?
No, as categorical funding, the hope and the intent is that that's going to be tied to their general fund supplemental state aid. They can separate that, though, and that has been dialogue that we've had at the state level. So far, they've not done that with any categorical funding. I hope that they don't do that in the future. So this should grow over time, the total investment of $150. Last year, I wanted to say it was about $307 per student. So going into next year, it'll be $312 per student. So there is growth. I hope that continues.
Well, coming back to the MOU, these pieces are kind of interrelated. If they decided not to increase the supplemental state aid percentage as applicable to this TLC money, then in the following year, the salaries of the people that are in these roles would increase because of collective bargaining, and we would have increased the salary schedule, but the pot of money to pay those individuals would stay the same size. So then we're back to the scenario that Dr. Patil referenced. That may mean that when we do the math, we can now only afford X number of these roles, and X would be less than the year prior. So then the question is, what happens, or how do you determine, first of all, which of the people that you had in the roles last year are now not going to be? And those individuals want to know before they apply to go into the role, if that were to happen to me, what happens to my job? Well, the answer is you've still got one because of 279 contract, but all else remaining equal, someone in the district would likely need to be laid off. And that's again is a mandatory subject of bargaining, which is spelled out in the MOU. We hope we don't have to entertain how that works, but we have to be realistic, and things are cyclical, and we have to anticipate at some point we'll be looking at that part of the language.
But at least we have a 3-year run rate.
Yep. That's right.
Hopefully.
Okay.
So one more question, my assessment question. So
Yeah,
how will
please.
are there things that you'll have to do to assess the success of it, or the quality of the leadership, or?
Yes, we have to have a rigorous process to evaluate. Our administrators will be the point of contact
Okay.
with the positions in their building. We'll have other people across the district for those district level positions. It's an annual review.
Oh, there is, okay.
Yeah, so we will review that.
By the
and
building
actually-
principals?
Building principals and the other administrators responsible for those other
So
positions.
I assume there's reporting all this on this.
And then there's an annual report that has to be provided to the state on impact that we have seen, the data components regarding TLC, so there's an ongoing accountability component to it.
Okay. Is there a lot of extra reporting by the leaders, or by the people in these positions that they're doing above what they're doing already while they're teaching? Or?
No, teaching's, as you well know, a tough job. It's a challenging job. It's a lot of time, and these positions as well will be some time to data collect, to look at the initiatives, to help plan and lead some of the professional developments and collaborative teams and those other aspects. So will there be some data collection components? Yes. Will it be greater than or less than being in the classroom with all the grading requirements and all the lesson planning? That's tough to say just because of the nature of it.
We wouldn't want to limit the number of people that apply if there's a lot of hoops they have to jump through.
We want these to be attractive positions and really get great people from the great candidates that we have, which is our entire teaching pool across our district. So, and we know that there are some people interested, and I think over the course of the next month we'll find out how many and really be excited about how this progresses into the future.
How are these instructional coaches different than the ones we had? How many years ago was that? We had
It's 5 years. It was right before I came.
Right.
Yeah, and now we have one instructional coach.
And how is this different, or is it very similar to this? Just so we'll be able to have them.
I think the training is going to be a little bit different than what it was in the past.
Mhm.
We do have professional development already starting next spring. We're going to bring in Heather Clifton from Learning Forward to work with our teachers and even a half a day the administrators and the teachers, because as an administrator, there are things we do not want our instructional coaches to do. We don't want them to be the substitute teachers, the recess supervisors, because if we're pulling them out of their role all the time, they're not able to be as effective in the classroom. There's different approaches that you can take. The other day, Adrian and I and Dan were at Diane Sweeney, and she's more of a student-centered approach. So there's many different approaches out there you can take. Right now we're going to start off with Heather Clifton, and then we're kind of going to see where that leads us.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's exciting work. And again, I know I took down the last slide as we exchanged the wireless connector, but cannot thank the committee enough. They have done marvelous work, and again, we have committee members at the table, committee members in the audience, and it's been.
I would only say that I'm glad we didn't rush to be one of the first round applicants. As Adrian often said, we're building this plane as we're flying it. At least we've had the time to walk through the process, have the conversations that are necessary to develop a program that's going to be user-friendly and entice people to go into those roles. I would hate to have known what this would look like had we rushed to make an application and we're designing it on the fly. And I really like the fact that we were in the third year round. It gave us time to really process it correctly. And that's from my point of view. So.
And I think one of the differences too with the instructional coaches that's going to be a huge benefit for us is there's going to be at least one in every building.
Good.
And that's going to be a huge impact, I think. They'll be more accessible to teachers.
So they won't necessarily be subject-related coaches, they'll be more building-level coaches. Okay.
Actually just at the training we had the other day, they said that the content, there's 4 different areas to look at, and they really said interpersonal skills is probably one of the top things that people prefer, and then different coaching practices would be the second. The third would be pedagogy, and the fourth, the content.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I think that it'll be qualitatively different because the instructional coaches we had before, it was it was pre-PLC, and I think we have a much more collaborative culture than we've ever had, and that's changing and improving all the time. And I think that will make it different. I think people will be more likely to tap these people to improve their
That's a good point. And weren't they more content-based before?
It was a lot of
They
stuff.
were reading and right.
So I have a lot of gray hair, so I'm a credible guy to provide a little historical.
I know that.
So I do kind of look at the long view of this because this district a few years ago looked at what we were doing and said, were we satisfied with what we were doing? And we pretty much said we're not. We want to raise the bar a little bit. And so we looked around at what other places around the country were doing. We looked at all the research and what they were doing. The high achieving places had established collaborative cultures in their building. And so we took that step and we've established professional learning communities. And it is changing the way we think. I mean, I was old school, grew up in old school where we're basically independent contractors. I'm going to shut my door, leave me alone, I'll do my job. That's all gone. We don't leave kids behind anymore. We don't say, I'm sorry, that we're just going to pass you along, we're not going to help you, that kind of stuff. And so I think this is the next natural step, the next logical step for us, that we take the people in our district, the talent that we have, who want to be leaders and are talented pedagogical people, and we use those people that exist in the system to support our instruction and improve achievement. That's kind of a short historical.
That's great. Thanks, Jim.
My dad always said, the cream rises to the top.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this recognizes.
Yeah.
The cream will rise to the top, and they'll help support us all.
Without making it necessarily competitive.
I don't think so.
Right.
I think that edge, because of the professional learning communities that we have, we've sort of broken that ice with each other. And it wasn't easy. I'm not here to say, bingo, one day it was magic and we were all getting along and everything was perfect. That's not the way it works, because that's not the way we functioned before. But it's not like what it was before. It's much more open, and people are very willing to discuss how they're teaching and how they can change that with each other. So I think that atmosphere is there now for these things to really happen in a qualitative way.
I think it's also going to be teacher initiated. I mean, the teacher and the coach will initiate what they want to work on together. It's not going to be the instructional coach coming in to do. I mean, it's that whole sense of we're going to work together on a project, and the teacher will initiate that. Here's what I need help with, or whatever. So,
and some of that's probably taking place already in the PLCs a bit, without without being formalized. Yeah.
Just creates more resources.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
More opportunities.
Okay, thank you very much for that overview and all of you that have participated in that, and we'll look for the next chapter and appreciate all the input.
Thank you.
Okay. And we've had before us a board resignation because of board member Jim Brown being elected our mayor. And I need to have a motion to accept that resignation.
So moved.
And a second? Okay.
Before we vote, can somebody, and I'll volunteer if nobody else wants to, read the letter for the record? Is that appropriate?
Sure.
Sure.
Did I
Sure.
just volunteer?
Yes, yes, you just did.
So this is to Andy Petit. Dear Andy, due to the election results this past December 1st, I will be sworn in as the new mayor of Cedar Falls on the 21st and will begin the duties of mayor January 1st, 2016. Therefore, I will be resigning my position as Cedar Falls School Board Director. This resignation will be effective December 13th, 2015. He's wrong there. We haven't accepted it yet. The past 6 years of serving on the school board have been very rewarding, especially these past few years of your tenure. I've appreciated your expertise, diligence towards the district, and your friendship. I know our city will benefit into the future from your leadership of our schools. I have been so impressed with our city's clientele and their affinity to education. There is also a big place in my heart for our staff, so professional, caring, and dedicated. The meetings we've had with the principals and cabinet members reflect the excellence that Cedar Falls has instilled throughout the years. Finally, I'm very optimistic for the future of our children as they progress through our great district. So with that, I conclude with the following. Lead on. My deepest sincerities, Jim Brown.
Thank you, Doug.
And again, we have for Jim a clock that represents a thank you from the district, from the board for his years of service, and they just say thank you for your dedication to our students and your years of service to Cedar Falls. So we will get this to Jim, and certainly want to thank him.
It's
Because
time.
they get time.
It's time.
I've never gone into the connotation, I guess, but, or the reason behind it, but it's certainly just a reflection of our gratitude for him. So,
There's no battery in it.
Very good. Okay, we've got a motion to accept this resignation. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. That accepted. We now have a vacancy on our board, and we need to have some discussion on how to fill that. And Andy, would you lead us in that dialogue on some of our options?
yes. This does not come up very often, obviously, when you have a vacancy and you start looking at what are the requirements, what are the options to move forward with an empty board seat. One of the things that we do know, the Iowa Code changed as of July 1st, 2015, which creates some different challenges as we look for guidance from our attorneys as well as ISAB and SAI to figure out what are the next steps, how do we accomplish the next steps. In essence, there are two main options that we can explore and look at. Number one, appoint. If you appoint somebody, you have to do that within 30 days. Some of the new guidance and expectations are you have to advertise for that. You have to ask for anybody that's interested to contact our office, which is dramatically different from in the past, how that was handled. And then that would need to be a position appointed by January 14th, which is 30 days from accepting that resignation, which is today. Number two, the other option is that we can look at a special election and say we are not going to appoint the position. As I look at this option, one of the things that I reflect on is I have sat in and worked with many, many great people as they have expressed interest in running for the board. In fact, we have had more people that have ran for the board than board seats, as many people around this table know. And have had some really good people not get elected. It seems like there's great interest in being on the board, great interest in having a say, and as we continue to look at the great challenges and making sure that we educate all of our students with excellence. And if we select this option to move forward with a special election, it means you don't appoint. You have to have a special election within 60 to 70 days of when you accept the resignation. And it has to be on a Tuesday, that special election. So that would mean, counting forward from December 14th, the special election would be February 16th on a Tuesday, which is, I think, 64 or 65 days from this time frame. Working backwards from that, there would be paperwork that would be due if you are interested in running, if this is the selection process or the direction that we move as a district, on January 22nd. Paperwork can be turned in between January 14th and January 22nd because that would be the 30th day, January 14th, following accepting the resignation, there's a window in there to turn in your petition if you want to run for the school board to be on the ballot, and that would be due to us by January 22nd, which would place your name onto the ballot on February 16th. So those are the two options. It's been an interesting process to gather information and to learn about the different options as we look to the future. I think one of the discussion points for the board would simply be, do we want to look at an appointment, or do we want to, I think in essence, say great amount of interest over the course of the last several years and allow the democratic process to play out and have the public weigh in on who will be sitting at, not that seat because we rotate around, but one of these seats at the table on February 16th.
I think another point though
Please.
also is that, isn't it, if we would appoint, then they would serve until our next election, which would be in April for the
Correct.
bond. So there would be a
Right.
board election and a bond
Yep.
referendum at the same time. And if we open it to the public now, the election would be in February and it would not be at the same time as the bond in April. Is that
Well,
correct?
they would run until September of 2017.
Okay.
So they'd be elected for 18
So there
months.
wouldn't be two issues on either ballot.
Correct.
Okay.
I guess my preference would be to let the wheels of democracy roll, and despite the fact that there is some extra cost to doing an election, which what does the Blackhawk auditor charge us for running an election?
Between 4,000 or 5,000.
5,000 to 8,000, yeah.
And the hope would be we would pare that down to maybe even less sites, or we'd work with them to try
Probably not. I already talked to her about it.
to... Oh, okay. So we
So
talked
much for
about
hope.
that. So,
I mean, I think that's the most democratic. I'm sure we'd have many qualified candidates that would come forward, and then asking us as a board to decide, make that decision. Just doesn't seem right. Seems like it should be the community that votes for it.
Other input?
I agree.
What Jeff
Agree?
said.
I agree.
Okay. We've
Does
reached
that
consensus.
Does that need a
And
motion?
it does not need a motion.
does not. No,
Oh.
we just don't appoint somebody January 11th.
And then it just- Okay.
Then it automatically takes place.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Excellent.
Wait,
Okay.
does that mean we can't announce it until January 11th, or?
That's a great question.
They,
Awesome question.
we have to wait the 30 days,
Uh-huh.
and then by statute, the board secretary is required to call for a special election. So we will then, on the 31st day, call for a special election. That would be the same day that nomination petitions could be accepted. And then that'll give the community roughly 8 days to gather those signatures and get them back turned into us.
So when you sign a petition, you write the date, and a signature will be invalid if the date is, for example,
Correct.
tomorrow. That they
And it would be
cannot
no
get-
different than a regular school board election during that 8-day window. There's all of you have filled out paperwork for nominations to be on school ballots, so you're familiar with how that process works. So it would be very similar to that process, but instead of having that roughly 3 to 4 week window to collect your signatures, it's going to be condensed down to roughly 8 days. And then Martin Luther King holiday is in the middle of all this, so that is a slight snag, but not a major snag.
I think that's a...
And we will announce time and date when they have to be turned in by,
Right.
so that everybody knows that on this date by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, this is when
Right.
everything has to be turned in.
You're going to have to announce 2 dates then. The date that it has to be turned in by,
The date,
and
the
first,
start date and
the
the end
start-
date,
yeah.
yes.
Right,
We
what's
will,
valid,
we will
if
note
valid,
it.
yeah.
Right, because the start date's a little weird because you
Right.
think it'll be
Right.
So,
And
it's a
that's
much
50
smaller window.
signatures?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think your point
Yes,
is
it
very
would
valid.
still be 50
50
signatures. That does not change
Okay.
from a normal election.
5-0.
And so we'll make sure that that's all out in the public so everybody's aware of those dates once we work with Blackhawk County Elections Office and get things pinned down tight.
So real soon after the names are turned in, absentee ballots could,
Pardon?
so do people even have time for absentee ballots on this election?
They would,
Yeah,
yeah.
they would.
Yep.
And we've already had a couple of preliminary conversations with elections office about how the process would work and how we could do some things to speed things along, but we are hand tied a bit by the code and the deadlines as a requirement set forth in the Code of Iowa. So we'll work through that and move things along as expediently as we can, and we'll be very public about filing dates and that sort of thing as we get those turned up.
And I'm going back to Doug's question. I don't know if you had signatures prior to the January 14th 30-day
No,
window.
you can't. The ballots can't. The petitions can't go up before a certain date.
There we go. Okay.
So, there's a certain date that they can be accepted by. So
Right, that's already there.
Perfect. That was new
there's
information for me.
a window.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you for doing that research and defining that for us all.
And now you got it all answered for the state level too, right? Because
Yeah.
we
We
were
did.
probably the only ones that have come forward with that.
With unique circumstances,
Yeah.
there were some questions that needed to be asked and answered that we were the first to
Yeah,
ask those questions.
yeah,
So,
good.
and again, Doug was the one that was the point person to get those questions answered, and couldn't thank him enough for all the work that he did with this.
Nothing like being the tip of the spear, right?
I'm catching it. Okay, let's move then to a Pete Junior High property discussion. And Doug, is that you to?
I think
Okay.
I'm the one that's going to start
Okay.
this. Let me bring a picture up here so that everybody can kind of see. There we go. As all of us in the community are probably pretty well aware that the city is planning on redoing University Avenue. And you'll see up on the screen we have a photograph of part of the work that's going to be done on University Avenue. Oh, thank you. And the city is requesting that they need approximately 0.3 of 1 acre from the school district in order to construct the roundabout that you see on the screen. We've been in some preliminary conversations with the city, and the city, what compounds our problem is our football fields in the green space, as you see on the screen. The football fields for practice for football run north-south or up and down on the screen. And because of the University Avenue, even though it's only 0.3 of 1 acre, it's just enough that it would not allow us to have 2 full-length 100-yard football fields for practice at the Pete site, and the fact that then when we were kicking extra points or field goals, we'd be dropping balls on the traveled portion of University Avenue. And so in working with the city, all parties have agreed that the best solution to that problem would be to turn the football fields 90 degrees so that they would in essence run east-west or from the right to the left. What would happen in that circumstance is we would still have 2 football fields. Unfortunately, the south field, or the field closest to University Avenue, would probably be about 70 or 80 yards in length instead of a normal 100-yard length practice field. In conversations with football coaches and administrators at Pete Junior High School and Gary Coonan, our AD, that they didn't feel that would be a problem, especially for 7th grade. And so we've been working with the city, and the city needs to acquire that 0.3 of 1 acre. We then in turn need to have all the ground reshaped, re-landscaped, so that we can turn the field. We would also be able to provide some stormwater improvements to the site by putting tile in and some other things to take care of some stormwater issues that we have on the site. And then also the potential of putting an irrigation system in that site to irrigate that general area. The site is used extensively, a lot more than just by the school district. The city uses it with Park and Rec for a lot of activities, especially during summer months. They use it for soccer. They use it for fall pee-wee football and that sort of thing. And so we do not have an agreement for you to see tonight. We're working on that with our attorneys, between the district's attorney and the city's attorney. But in essence, the agreement would say that in exchange for the 0.3 of 1 acre, they would recreate our practice fields, grade the fields, install 2 goalposts, partially offset the cost of an irrigation system, do all the engineering and costs associated with the project, and pay all costs for survey and everything else associated with it. So in essence, it would be a zero cost for the school district to have that site improved in exchange for that roughly 0.3 of 1 acre. Again, I apologize, we don't have the actual draft document for the board to look at tonight. That's still, we're still trying to hammer some of that out, but in summary, that's what we would be looking at. Tonight, what we would be asking for is for the board to set a public hearing for our next board meeting in January. At that time, we would have the public weigh in on this proposal. We will certainly have that document available for the board to review in January at the early January meeting, and then would make recommendation for final acceptance of the agreement at the second board meeting in January.
As everybody knows at the board table, the acquisition or disposition of public land, we've gone to closed session to talk about this, so we've really spent some time looking at this, talking about this, and know that our intent is to make this a zero cost to the district, but also ensure that we have that great, strong working relationship with the city, and do this at the cost of the improvements that will make, hopefully, that site a little bit better for our students, for practice facilities, green space facilities that we have there.
You talked about a soccer field, I think.
Right. Oh, I did forget all about that. One of the nice benefits out of all this is we will have a regulation, full-size soccer field. That I don't think we would use it on a competition level, but it could theoretically be used at a junior high level and maybe even 9th grade level for competition. But we do not currently have a full-size soccer field of any way, shape, or form in the district. And that would be a real plus for us. And obviously, the Park and Rec department is eyeing that as well.
What is this pathway through there? Is that a bike trail? Or
That's just an artist's drawing of what a pathway might look
because
like.
if it's a sidewalk for kids, they're never going to take that.
From the roundabout that you see on the drawing up to the north side of the bank, that will not be there. That's not there now, and it will not be in the future.
Okay.
The other path that you see from Pete coming down to the bank, that is currently there, and that we would plan to retain that.
Okay. Okay.
As we said before, one of the aspects that we know as a district we will take on in the future, those students that attend Pete from that Southdale Attendance Center south of University, we will work to bus any students to Pete from that area due to the fact that we know that crossing a 4-lane road will be something that we will certainly expect bus transportation to get to Pete Junior High. We do that with students that cross over Hudson, that cross over some other fairly busy roadways. So that will now be a in-town bus route, and we have currently buses that pick students up from that area, but this will be kind of an exemption that we have for routes.
Okay, we've heard the recommendation, and we've discussed this in our closed session, and we need to set a public hearing for this.
Can I throw out one more
Sure.
caveat? This is really the same process, and historically I can't talk about this with great detail or knowledge because I was not here, but with the Edwards Pool site, the school acquired that from the city, and really we acquired that for the cost of the work at the site. And that is about 4 acres to our school district total mass. What we're doing here is kind of the reverse to ensure that the improvements are done, but then giving that 0.3 of an acre.
That happened in about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the city gave the school district 4.7 acres for Edwards site, and the only cost to the district was the site the cost to demolish the existing structure and take the pool up. And so this is sort of a flip of that. in that we're giving the city 0.3 eighths of 1 acre in exchange for all the site improvements.
Do I hear a motion to set public hearing?
I move that the Cedar Falls Community School District Board of Education set January 11th, 2016 at 7 p.m. as the date and time to hold a public hearing for the proposed sale of the portion of property located at 525 East Searly Boulevard, which is Pete Junior High School.
Have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to set a public hearing there for January 11th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next, we have the Southdale Elementary classroom remodel. Project bids. Doug, would you?
And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Channer from
Okay.
Structure Architects.
Good evening, everyone. Last week we took bids on this project. We received 6 bids, ranging from $429,429 to $459,980. It was kind of an interesting bid opening, as started out $436,400, then $436,300, then $436,104.
Wow.
So it's kind of intriguing. But anyway, low bid, $429,429. Peters Construction out of Cedar Falls was the low bidder, and it is my recommendation that we award it to them for that price. It's a little bit over my original estimate of $401,950.
So what caused it to be, as you looked through and combed through it, what caused it to be higher than the original estimate?
There were 2 things. One, right at the very end, we added some tuck pointing to the project. Some of the existing columns on the exterior of the building, we thought it best to just get it done at this point. We needed to do a little bit of work on just right out of the gate, so let's just do it. It's something that Doug was going to do next summer, I
It would have been
believe.
done the following summer, right?
So that, and then as I calculated the numbers, the previous projects were close enough together that I used real numbers, and I was able to extrapolate those out, and some of them ended up being higher than what I extrapolated.
So there wasn't another single thing
There is
like
no
the
single,
tuck
it's
pointing?
within, no, there's no single unit, line item that was out of line at
And,
all.
and we did find at the 59th minute there were 2 exterior doors out of the classrooms that we made a decision to replace instead of repair, simply because of the fact they were starting to rust. And in the long run, that'll save us a maintenance issue down the road in a few years, and then adds for a little more continuity and uniformity in the building as well. So with this, we remind the board that there is $25,000 worth of allowances built into this contract, if I remember right.
Yes.
So we've got a little bit of a cushion built into this already, plus the normal contingency amount budget that we put on top of it. This does come out of the 2016-17 school year physical plant and equipment levy, so we're looking at next year's budget. And this project completes a goal that the board set 8 years ago, that all classrooms within the school district will be air conditioned, with the exception of the high school. Now we do have multi-purpose room in 2 elementaries that are not air conditioned yet, and 1 gym in each junior high is not air conditioned yet. But that was not a part of the original goal when that was established 8 years ago. When the community voted on the PEPAL levy, that at 8 years ago, at that time, the board set that goal, and we've met that goal now before the PEPAL levy came out. So, is there still some remodeling that would need to be done, some improvements? Because you've got some classrooms in that building that were constructed in the late 70s
that sort of thing. Yes, that's there, won't say it's not. But as far as the air conditioning component, that was a goal that the board set, and we will be meeting that goal now with the completion of this project.
What's the total square footage on this again? That we're touching? I know the tuck point, obviously it's not that technically square footage, but.
Right. The classrooms are right at 900 square feet, so 18, probably 2,500.
So, and,
Just round numbers.
okay. So, I mean, just to help me out, because people ask me, why does it cost so much to renovate a classroom? I'm just doing the quick math of $172 a square foot. I mean, if that's kind of in the range, but you know, I get the question from people to say, why is it so expensive to renovate, you know, a classroom when, you know, 175 I can do land acquisition, I can put up a brand new building, and it won't be a school, it'll be a very nice Class A office space, but.
Well, we're going in and we're taking basically everything that's there out. In this project, there's also a lot of plumbing that's being done, which we all know plumbing is pretty pricey. So we're gutting the existing restroom, coming back with all new toilets, lavatories, the sink, classrooms themselves. We're relocating the sinks from where they currently are to a different wall, so we're having to cut floors open to rerun piping underneath. It all just keeps adding up.
And as we talked before, I think there's still some asbestos abatement that needs to be done in this
There is.
area, which is a challenge as well. And I think
But that's a pretty small area, just like a closet, isn't it?
It's not very much, but again, asbestos abatement, just to get them on site, is expensive. Typically, it's you know, adds up with more square footage, but the cost is to get them there to be able to do the abatement. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that the things that we're doing in this classroom are no different than what we've been doing in classrooms in other buildings over the last 8 years when we've gone and we do a classroom.
Yeah, actually, I'm not saying, I'm saying educate me, because people are asking me, why does it cost so much?
Well,
Because you know, I know I can build a commercial building for that cost, brand new, buy the land. So I just want to, the plumbing is definitely very expensive. Bathrooms are very expensive if you're going to rip those out and do.
HVAC is coming back with Airedale units, so it's completely taking what's currently being used in there, changing it out completely. All you really have left is the shell. So we're also asking for a lot of work to be done in a condensed time frame.
We want it done during the summer so we can get the kids back in there. I think the other component too, and again, I know Doug and Dan can talk about this when people ask, much better than I can, but you know, the code requirements to make sure that it's up to date and meets the educational standards are a little different than a commercial building. So
Yeah.
that,
Well, I
that's
think
the
that's what's
component.
driving the relocation of the sinks in the classroom, is because they're not ADA compliant in the hallway where they're at in the back, right?
Yep, bathroom's not
Yeah.
ADA compliant
bathrooms
right
are
now.
ADA compliant. New fire code with how you put water coolers in hallways now, which basically means now we have to recess all our water coolers. We just can't have them mounted on the wall in a hallway anymore. ADA compliance now for the sinks for students or staff members in the individual classroom. That's all changed. And remember, we're also bringing in all new technology, so we're putting in new projectors, new sound systems in the classrooms. We're doing all of that work as well to meet the standard that was developed roughly 10 years ago by the facilities committee or the committee at that time. And I think the proof in the pudding has been over the last 8 years as we've been doing those classrooms, the comments and the positive instructional spaces that we're able to create for kids in the various buildings that we're doing this work.
So does this include all the furniture and the cabinetry and everything, or is it just the?
It includes the
All new millwork.
Yeah,
Yep.
but not the furniture.
Not furniture, but all new millwork.
Okay.
Now, North Cedar was an exception to that in those projects, but generally speaking, furniture is not included. But again, North Cedar, the last 2 summers was sort of an exception to that rule.
Okay, thank you for your questions, and Dan. Do I hear a motion that we accept the bid for the Southdale project?
So moved. Or do we have
Second?
to have it read?
No.
Okay, so moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, Jenny, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
And our superintendent's report, Dr. Petit.
Just a couple different items. One listed, January 13th, 2016 is our administrative council board retreat at 9:30. Just a reminder for that. Second item that's not listed, the court has approved our petition request to move the Christensen funds to the school foundation. And we are working to finalize that transfer. Just as a reminder to all the board members, that was done for multiple reasons. But number one, we know that the investment returns could be much greater with the foundation just because of the restrictions Iowa Code places on us as a district. Number two, we know that would be the location when Mrs. Christensen or Miss Christensen gifted that to the district. The foundation wasn't in existence, and if it was, that's the place that it would have been placed at. It was just a natural location. And then we requested from the court to make sure that we defined with more flexibility what, I'm drawing a blank on what the word was, but it was basically equipment, thank you, and to define what equipment is, because equipment back in the late 80s is much different than equipment now, or the late 90s. So we wanted to make sure that we asked that, and the court did approve that. The other component, and I'm not sure if I can't remember when I hit print how many copies I made of this, but if each of the board members could get a copy of this, I know members of cabinet have seen this as well already, just as information, but on Wednesday, and I believe Wednesday at 9:30 a.m., the Iowa Department of Education is going to release what they called 2 years ago the attendance center rankings, which they are now calling the Iowa School Report Card. Now, the top line of this letter actually says later today, but I've drafted this because this is the letter that will go out to all staff about 9 a.m. on the morning on Wednesday as a precursor prior to the attendance center rankings. Just so everybody's aware, you can kind of look through this, but some of the components of this comes from the 2013 education reform bill that we talked about earlier that the TLC came from as well. But there are interesting components to this. Number one, there are going to be 6 rating categories, and those categories are going to go from exceptional, high-performing, commendable, acceptable, needs improvement, priority, and those are established on a bell curve framework. You will see that there are going to be 8 categories in which they create those 6 grade rankings, and those are listed in the middle of this. And those 8 categories are proficiency, college and career ready growth, annual expected growth, closing the achievement gap, college and career readiness, aside from the growth, graduation rates, attendance, and staff retention. And then there's 2 other measures that were in that 2013 legislative bill that will be coming in the future, and those are parent involvement and community activities involvement that will be listed in these at a later date. One of the things that we talk about, and there's a couple bullets up on top with talking points. Number one, we strive to improve and ensure success for all of our students each and every day. We have wonderful staff that does that each and every day. Number two, this is another data point to utilize as we continue to focus on excellence every day in all that we do. Many buildings were very, very close to the next highest level, and again, I think we're going to see when they come out that we always look at improvement, but we also know that the rankings came out, I think, positively as we would hope with our buildings. Then the final data point is this just continues to add to that dialogue, to the data components as we look at our entire system as a whole. Our ACT composite, our 9th grade retention rates, our graduation rates, our targeted rates of number of students engaged in classroom activities at higher order thinking skills, our technology usage. So this is just another component that we'll add to that. And I will add another bullet when I send this out, and that bullet right now is the embargo data where our schools are categorized, and we cannot release that until the state releases the data Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. So I wish I could provide more to you. I can't, but I just wanted to give
But
you
you have
this.
you do have the information.
We do. We received that roughly 2 weeks ago. They wanted to make sure that we looked over the data, verified the data that's in the system, because they drill down fairly specifically into each of our buildings and each of our data components based on those 8 categories. We've done that have all districts across the state, and now they will release that.
So maybe it's along the same line, but in light of the fact that No Child Left Behind has been replaced, and I assume this maybe ties it in, but I guess I've been trying to, read what I can about that, but I guess I would appreciate a primer on, what does it mean for us as far as, because it, says it pushes more responsibility and control and authority into the local school board. So,
Although we don't quite know yet, do we?
We don't, and that's why I smile,
Okay.
because
We
that's
don't
what
know.
we're waiting for. We have some overviews. I think it's a 1,200-page bill that was approved and signed in.
and you haven't read it yet?
Well, I've read parts of it, but not all of it. But we are trying to determine, I know the implementation will be, there's some components in 2016, the majority of ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, will be in 2017, 2018, and even some go out to 2019, 2020. So it's kind of a phased-in bill. We are trying to collect that information, but we will certainly provide that for the school board as information comes in. Right now, since it was just signed in, I think Thursday by the president, obviously there's not a huge amount of guidance out there yet, but as that comes in, we will provide that. But this does align with the
I was
kind of
gonna
the
say, this
premise
seems
of
like it aligns
ESSA.
And when this will be used for funding? I mean, what will this be used for?
Well,
Just
that
public
is
information? What is?
public
What's
information.
the purpose of this?
That's a great question. And as Doug always says, of course. But that's a very good question. It came out of the 2013 legislative
Right.
bill, so
Right.
it's a requirement.
Right.
And I think the premise was knowing some of the federal funding and some of the federal expectations, and now ESSA, which is really more focused on how do we support those that might need support. I think, and this isn't in what I've read in ESSA yet, but I believe there is still a requirement that says you have to identify your most needy schools, and this does that by having a priority label.
Okay.
And my guess will be there will be some federal funds, potentially some state level funds, to help support those schools
Okay.
labeled priority.
Okay. Okay.
Now,
Otherwise, it'll be primarily the perception people have of a district.
of a district, of a building, because it is attendance center. It's not a district level ranking. It is actually attendance buildings
Right.
in each of our 9 attendance centers are individually ranked.
And this is only an Iowa scorecard. This is no
Iowa.
federal.
This is Iowa. There are many states that do rank districts and schools, so this is not new, but this is something that is new for the state of Iowa.
Thank you for that information. Any board member comments or questions?
We kind of flunked on our doodle.
We did, yes,
Using the right vernacular.
Flunked our doodle.
we did. And I need to redoodle. I just have not done that yet, so to find a date where we can kind of discuss ISAB, some of the learnings, and what we do as we continue to move forward with that. So
Did I see even you put one of the dates, was it the proposed retreat date, and that's also not available for everyone? Is that right?
yes, I believe so. I can I'll redoodle.
Redoodle. Okay.
But the retreat still is on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'll redoodle.
Any other comments? Hear a motion, we adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for everything.